We don't learn much about ourselves by just paying attention to how we act and the way we live when things are going well. That doesn't teach us all that much about ourselves, because when things are going well, a person of great virtue and a person of moderate to maybe not so much virtue kind of have it about the same. It is when things are not going well that we learn what we're made of. One writer said that there are 3 things that will teach you the true character of someone. The 3 things are when they lose their keys, when Christmas lights get tangled, and when you lose your luggage on a trip. Those are the 3 things that help us to see what we're really made out of, what really gets us. And that's what I think is so important for us about remembering any of the saints, especially on a day like today when we remember all of them. But the saints were not people who lived lives that were unattainable. They were just like us in every way. They had no special advantage. What makes the saints saints is the way that they responded to adversity. And I turn to this reading again, this familiar reading, how wise the church is that we don't even have choices or a cycle with the gospel for All Saints' Day. It's always the same. It's the Beatitudes. And what we see in the Beatitudes is that these are lifestyle markers for people who are going through a very tough time. Who's blessed, according to this? People who used to have wealth, but don't now. They've become poor in spirit. People who have experienced loss. That's what makes a saint, is the way that they carry a loss. Who's blessed? Those who do not have the last word, who've been humiliated in some kind of exchange at some point. The ones we call meek. You know what saints experience? Oppression and unfairness, because they're the ones that hunger and thirst for better times. They didn't get to experience that, so that's what drives them. People who were gentle when they could have enforced a penalty on someone who really wronged them, but instead they were merciful. People who lived during difficult times, but instead of complaining and getting cynical, decided to sow peace. And people who were insulted and persecuted. People who had rumors and lies spread throughout their communities about them. They were the ones who were blessed, because it was in those trials they showed who they really were. We are called to be saints. This is not a designation reserved for the extra holy or those who had a head start. In fact, there will be many things that are likely to happen to us in our lives. And there are people sitting here right now who've experienced the unimaginable in their life. People who have had terrible health problems, have lost dear loved ones. There's people here who have experienced the loss of a child or other unthinkable, unspeakable things. But all of us, each one of us, is called, no matter what happens to us, to know that we are called to take whatever life dishes us and persevere through it. Keep walking toward God's kingdom, not letting whatever it is take us down. Saints are the people who have the exact same adversities as everybody else, sometimes even worse, but they respond with their very best selves. If we were to pick a mountain climber to help guide us on a journey, we couldn't tell much about that climber if we go for a stroll by the river. We're going to need to put them to the test. And that's what saints have shown. They've gone through some of the worst things that can happen. Some of them have had quiet lives without any attention. Whatever it was, they kept walking forward. Many of us will experience tragedies that are scary, but we will be able to cope with every one of them except for one. The only real tragedy in life would be to not become a saint. That would be the only real tragedy in our lives, is to, in the end, not have persevered. Nelson Mandela, who of course was this heroic figure in South Africa, he was the first Black president of that country. He was an amazing leader. He survived 30 years in jail, being jailed by a racist government. He was often called a living saint because of all he did for his country. And he rejected the title. He did what a lot of us do. I'm no saint. But then he caught himself. He said, unless by saint you mean a sinner who keeps on trying. That's it. That's it. That's who we celebrate tonight. Sinners who kept on trying. People who experienced tragedy but didn't give up. Because there's only really one tragedy that could ever happen to us. That would be to not become a saint.